Okay. Have we heard of this? Now remember, he was working for 13 years with this group, but then he went to jail and saw the light, and now he's working against them. Let me remind you who this group is. They called for violence against American troops in Afghanistan, saying American actions should be met with a sword, not words of condemnation. In 2007, they got busted for plotting to bomb military and civilian airports in Germany. They carried out attacks against Americans and Israeli embassies in Uzbekistan in 2004. And do you remember the website that we showed you at the top of this program, Khalifa.com? This one, remember this? Yeah. Isbat Tahrir to the Supreme Council of Egyptian Armed Forces. The second Camp David protector has fallen. Oh, it's great, isn't it? Khalifa.com. In 2009, it was Isbat Tahrir who was also responsible for this. Remember, Khalifa, Isbat Tahrir America presents. Where is it, baby? Bring it on. The Khalifa Conference. Caliphate Conference 2009, the fall of capitalism and the rise of Islam. This happened at the Hilton Hotel in Illinois. The conference was called The Fall of Capitalism, the Rise of Islam. They are the same people behind the website we showed you at the top of the hour. But hey, he's reformed, and that's good enough for the State Department. Is it good enough for you? This man was a bad dude, and he says he had a pivot point in prison. That's great. Maybe he has. I can't judge the man's heart. But I do go back to Van Jones, who says exactly the same thing. I had a pivot point. In fact, I believe his pivot point came in prison. Jail. Van Jones said, quote, I am willing to forego the cheap satisfaction of the radical pose for the deep satisfaction of the radical ends. Van Jones hasn't changed anything, but he's put on a suit and a tie, and now he can talk all pretty. Your life is at stake, America, our Western way of life. Do you know enough to say, oh, I'm totally comfortable. If the State Department says he's cool, I'm cool with him. Remember, the State Department has been so good on everything. The director of intelligence for our country has said this about the Muslim Brotherhood.
A very heterogeneous group, largely secular, which has eschewed violence and has decried al-Qaeda as a perversion of Islam.
Because remember, the Muslim Brotherhood has had a change of heart. They used to be that way, but they're not anymore. Now, one of the guys on the board of CPAC, a conservative, said this weekend about the Muslim Brotherhood.
Mr. Khan? With what? That we should be outreaching to the Muslim Brotherhood and
well, the nation is
no Muslim Brotherhood in the United States. There's no Muslim Brotherhood in the United States.
No.
There's no Muslim Brotherhood. A board member of CPAC says that? He's a conservative. He was in with Bush. Isn't that weird? One topic of interest for the State Department was Egypt. Here's one series from the cables. Overcoming Adversity, a case study from Egypt. A discussion about Egypt's pro-democracy youth movements and the importance of the online space in Egypt to speak out in favor of democracy and human rights. The moderator was Matthew Waxman, Associate Professor of Law at Columbia Law School. Now, one questioner actually picked up and said, hey, what about the consequences about working against Egypt, who's an ally? I mean, we're sending them money and we're plotting their demise. This is how he responded when asked if interfering in Egypt, America ran the risk of unleashing something that might come back and bite us in the butt or bite us here at home. Quote, these governments may not appreciate your involvement in the inspiring or helping to create this network of people that could, or would be, in the case of Israel, a threat. Don't you run the risk of unleashing something here that is going to come back and bite you, especially with our allies? Glassman answered, quote, we're very supportive of the pro-democracy groups around the world, and sometimes that puts us at odds with certain governments. There's a difference on an operational level between what we do in public diplomacy, and what is often done in official diplomacy. We're communicating and engaging at the level of the public, not at the level of officials. In other words, we're nudging the people. and we're engaging in duplicity. So, you know, it certainly is possible that some of these governments will not be happy with that. But what we're doing, that's what we do in public diplomacy. There's one more thing that is really quite disturbing, and we're going to share that next. All right, just to recap, here's where we're going. Last week, I told you, or 3 weeks ago, I told you radicals, Islamists, communists, and socialists will work together against Israel, work together against capitalism, work together to overthrow stability. What I didn't know at the time was that, believe it or not, our State Department was also in bed with these guys. I then said, part two, protests will become contagious. They cascade and they sweep the Middle East. We're seeing these happen right now. Not this yet. But let's pick it back up with the State Department. The State Department now, we know, was involved with all of this. Let me show you what Undersecretary Glassman said at American University in Cairo in 2009, how he invited several Egyptians who had an online presence and online activities. Listen.
Are we happy with everything that the Egyptians are doing, the Egyptian regime is doing on the democratic front? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I can tell you that we invited several Egyptians who have an online presence and online activities to our conference at the Alliance of Youth Movements. One of them, several of them, we were told, were deterred. I called the Egyptian ambassador to the United States to come to my office and criticized his government very explicitly for their conduct on this.
I wonder if any of this is happening now in Iran. Because none of this is spontaneous in Egypt, and that's what we were told. Now, the State Department, here he is, Glassman. Where did he get this idea to cobble all these groups together via social networking? Secretary Glassman explained it. It was at the suggestion of this man, Jared Cohn. Who is Jared Cohn? Well, Jared Cohn, you can find him now at Google. He is the director of Google Ideas. I love this here. Jared Cohn, director of Google Ideas, a new entity at Google aiming to reframe and act on old challenges in new and innovative ways. Oh, he's also an adjunct fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations. That is fantastic. He's engaging now in 21st century statecraft. Statecraft. So he worked for the State Department from 2006 to 2010. He was 24 years old at the time. He started there at 24, and Glassman explains that at the suggestion of Cohn, he traveled to Colombia to meet with some young people who started a movement on Facebook. With no help from the government, 33-year-old private citizen was able to get 400,000 people in his group. And from those meetings and through the work of Cohn, organizations are now being brought together, and the Alliance of Youth movement is its hub. Now, let me talk about this. This is the April 6th movement. Under Secretary Glassman, he has mentioned this movement, the Shabab 6 of April, which has emerged as Egypt's large pro-democracy youth group. There is actually a good piece on this group in the last month's issue of Wired, and we'll have some members from this group coming as well. Okay, so the April 6th movement, what's this? This was started by two activists. One of the men described the operations room he created 15 days before the protests began. They met daily to discuss routine details, communicating with other sites, looking for data and information, and looking for innovative ways to avoid state security who would routinely preempt demonstrations and protests. At the same time, the April 6th movement publicly endorsed and supported members of the Muslim Brotherhood. They have called for the ending of all emergency laws, the drafting of a new constitution, and the annulment of the Camp David Accords. That's weird. Because, remember, this group is, of course, working with him, who's no longer a radical, which they're now accomplishing what this group also set out to do. Isn't that weird? But it's probably just the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I go back to the question the reporter asked Glassman and Cohen. Aren't you worried that maybe you're starting something that could come back to bite you? Apparently not. Not even with the end of the Camp David Accord, which has kept Israel out of war since 1978. I've got a couple of questions that I think people should ask. Let me show you this list of all of the groups that are involved here. Can you tell me who these groups are? Is anybody willing to do their own homework? Because the media is not going to. Start looking at who they're connected to. Can you just look at all of these? By the way, also, you know, I would look into all the people the State Department are working with. MSNBC, CBS, MTV. Maybe we should start watching those networks a little bit and seeing what their news coverage is like. And who are these groups? Who are they? Are they right? Are they left? Are they clean? Are they dirty? Are they front groups? I don't know. May I recommend, if you're doing your own homework, don't do a Google search. Seems to me that Google is pretty deeply in bed with the government. Remember, maybe this is explaining why Google is being kicked out of all the other countries. Are they just a shill now for the United States government? Who is Jared Cohn? Is he private citizen or government operative? And isn't this the second Google guy we've found? This is the second Google executive now being exposed as an instigator of a revolution. Are you comfortable with the government partnering covertly with media organizations, search engines, social networking, so they can bring change that the Washington elites have designed? I don't know about you, but I'm not really comfortable with that. I don't care if it's George Washington, George Bush, Barack Obama, or Abraham Lincoln. I'm not comfortable with that. It used to be called propaganda. What do we call it now? Oh yeah, that's right. Community organizing.